Amid the majestic peaks of the Alps, where nature is both enchanting and unforgiving, a small family embarked on a journey that seemed like nothing more than an autumn dream. But when a fierce storm suddenly struck, bringing torrential rain and cascading rockslides, they never imagined that their savior from the grasp of death would not be a human, but Max, a loyal German shepherd with eyes that burn like an eternal flame. This is a story of friendship beyond limits, of courage in the face of peril, and of how one small dog became a symbol of hope in the heart of the storm. Step into this emotional journey, where humans and animals stand together against the forces of nature, and discover the unspoken power of an unbreakable bond. Chapter 1. The journey begins. In a small town at the foot of the Alps, the Müller family, Hans, Anna, and their 8-year-old daughter Lena, lived in a cozy wooden house. Hans was an engineer with a deep love for nature, Anna was a primary school teacher, and Lena was an adventurous girl who dreamed of exploring the towering peaks her father often spoke about. The fourth member of their family was Max, a German shepherd with a thick black and tan coat and intelligent, shining eyes. Max was more than just a pet. He was a loyal companion who always watched over Lena in all her mischievous adventures. One autumn morning, as golden leaves drifted lazily onto the village road, Hans looked out the window and said, "Today is a perfect day for a hike. What do you all think?" Anna smiled in agreement, while Lena jumped excitedly. "I want to climb the highest peak. And Max is coming too." Hans checked the weather forecast. Clear skies, no signs of any trouble. He packed a map and a compass, while Anna prepared their food, sandwiches, water, and a little chocolate for Lena. Max, as if understanding the trip ahead, wagged his tail excitedly as he watched Lena put on her little backpack. The family got into their car and drove to the mountain base. From there, they began their journey to conquer Hochberg, a peak that was not too dangerous but still challenging enough to make the adventure worthwhile. The sky was a brilliant blue, pine forests stretched endlessly, and the cheerful songs of birds filled the air, lifting everyone's spirits. Max ran ahead, occasionally looking back as if to check whether the family was keeping up. Lena laughed. "Max is so fast. He's like a real guide." None of them knew that beyond nature's peaceful beauty, a fierce storm was silently forming in the distance. Chapter 2. Signs of Danger. After several hours of hiking, the family stopped to rest on a flat rock ledge. Hans pulled out the map and pointed out the remaining path to Lena. "We're halfway there. We just need to cross that ridge, and we'll reach the summit." Anna opened her bag, handing out sandwiches, while Max was rewarded with a small piece of sausage. Lena sat beside Max, running her fingers through his thick fur. "Do you like hiking, Max?" "I love it." But just as they finished their meal, a sudden cold wind swept through. Hans looked up, frowning. "The wind is picking up. That's strange." Above them, white clouds were beginning to gather, darkening into heavy gray masses. Anna asked anxiously, "Is it going to rain, Hans?" He shook his head. "The forecast didn't mention any rain. But to be safe, we should head back early." However, Lena pleaded. "But Dad, we're so close to the top. I want to see the view from up there." Hans hesitated, glancing at Max, who stood still, ears perked up as if listening intently to something. "Max, do you think it's okay?" Lena nodded eagerly. "Max is fine, Dad." Trusting his instincts but also swayed by his daughter's excitement, Hans decided to continue. Yet a faint sense of unease crept into his mind. They hiked a few hundred meters further when the sky suddenly darkened completely. Heavy storm clouds rolled in, and the wind howled, carrying dry leaves and small branches with it. Max suddenly barked loudly, circling them as if sounding an alarm. Hans stopped in his tracks, shouting, "This isn't good. We need to find shelter now." But on the steep mountainside, there was nothing but rocks and sparse bushes. Finding a safe refuge seemed like an impossible task. Chapter 3. The Storm Strikes. Before they could react, the storm descended like a monstrous beast. Rain poured down in torrents, turning into streams that swept away soil and rocks from the mountainside. Lena screamed in terror, clutching her mother's hand tightly. Anna held her daughter close, trying to shield her, but the violent wind nearly knocked her off balance. Hans shouted over the roaring storm. "Hold on to each other! Don't let go!" At that moment, a terrifying sound echoed from above, the sound of rocks tumbling. A massive boulder suddenly broke loose from the cliffside, hurtling straight toward the family. Hans yelled, "Move!" But the rain and wind held them in place like invisible chains. The boulder came closer, carrying the breath of death. Suddenly, Max sprang into action. With lightning speed, the dog lunged forward, using his body to shove Lena and Anna out of the boulder's path. The rock missed them by mere centimeters before crashing down into the abyss below. The family stood frozen, their hearts pounding. Lena burst into tears, sobbing, "Max! Max saved me!" But the danger was far from over. The storm continued to rage, the rain pounded relentlessly, and the wind howled like a wild beast. Max barked urgently, running back and forth as if urging them to follow. Hans understood immediately. "He wants us to go with him. Move now!" Holding on to each other, they stumbled forward, blindly following Max through the blinding storm. The dog led the way, his eyes glowing like beacons in the dark, unwavering and determined. Chapter 4: Shelter. After several grueling minutes battling against the furious elements, Max stopped in front of a small cave nestled beneath the mountainside. Rainwater streamed past the entrance, but inside, it was dry and sturdy enough to provide temporary refuge. Hans quickly inspected it. "This will do! Get inside!" Anna pushed Lena in first, followed by the rest of the family. Max stood at the entrance, his fur soaked but his eyes sharp and alert, like a vigilant guardian. Outside, the storm raged on. Thunder boomed, and the wind howled, but inside the cave, the Muller family slowly regained their composure. Lena clung to Max, whispering, "Thank you, Max. You're my hero." Anna stroked her daughter's hair, her voice trembling. "Without Max, I don't know what would have happened to us." Hans nodded, looking at the dog with deep gratitude. "He's not just a pet. He's our savior." The storm lasted for hours. They huddled together for warmth, listening to the furious wrath of nature outside. Max remained at the entrance, refusing to move, standing guard like a soldier protecting his family. Lena eventually drifted off to sleep in her mother's arms, while Hans and Anna sat quietly, recalling the moment Max had leaped to save them. "I never imagined a dog could do something like that," Anna murmured. Hans smiled, his eyes filled with admiration. "Max isn't just a dog. He's family." Chapter 5: The Sun Returns. When the storm finally passed, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, illuminating the mountainside. Hans stepped out of the cave to survey the surroundings. The ground was littered with rocks and fallen branches, but the path down the mountain was still passable. He turned back to the others. "We can go home now." Lena woke up and cheered when she saw Max wagging his tail excitedly. The family left the cave and began their journey back. Max ran ahead, as if to reassure them that the danger had passed. As they walked, Hans declared, "From now on, Max gets an extra portion of beef every day. He deserves more than any hero." Lena clapped her hands. "And chocolate too, right, Dad?" When they arrived back in town, news of Max's bravery spread quickly. The villagers called him the Dog of the Alps, and the Muller family became the center of admiration. But to Hans, Anna, and Lena, Max didn't need a title. He had been their hero all along. Chapter 6: The Aftermath of the Storm. As the Muller family returned to their small town at the foot of the Alps, they saw that the storm had left its mark. Village roads were covered in mud, a few rooftops had been torn off by the wind, and fallen trees lay scattered everywhere. The townspeople were busy cleaning up, sharing stories of the storm's destruction. Hans stopped to ask an old farmer, Mr. Karl, "Is everyone safe?" Mr. Karl shook his head. "Most people are fine, but a group of hikers hasn't returned yet. They went the same way as your family." Hans and Anna exchanged worried glances. They recounted their own experience, emphasizing how Max had saved them. The villagers gathered around, marveling at the German shepherd standing proudly beside Lena, his fur still damp but his eyes bright and determined. A child exclaimed, "Max is a superhero!" Lena grinned, stroking Max's head. "That's right! He's my superhero!" But the joy of their return was short-lived. Just as the family arrived home, a group of local rescuers knocked on their door. Their leader, Marcus, spoke urgently. "Hans, we heard about the storm on the mountain. A group of hikers is missing in that area. Do you remember anything that could help us?" Hans nodded and pulled out his map, pointing to the cave where they had taken shelter. "If they're still near that area, the cave could be a safe spot." Marcus glanced at Max and asked, "Did this dog lead you to the cave? Could he help us?" Hans hesitated, but Lena immediately chimed in. "Max is really smart. He can find the way." Anna squeezed her husband's hand and whispered, "If Max can help, we should try." Finally, Hans agreed. "All right, but I'm going with him." Chapter 7: The Rescue Mission. The next morning, Hans and Max joined the rescue team. Alongside Marcus and 3 other volunteers, they set off toward the mountains. Lena wanted to go too, but Anna held her back. "Stay home with me, sweetheart. Let Dad and Max handle this mission." Lena pouted but then nodded and hugged Max tightly before they left. "Be careful, Max!" The rescue team returned to the Hochberg slopes. The storm's aftermath was evident: landslides, uprooted trees, and streams of water still trickling down from the peaks. Hans led the way to the cave, but Marcus suspected the missing hikers might have wandered further east into more treacherous terrain. Max took the lead, sniffing the air, ears perked up and alert. After hours of searching, just as exhaustion was setting in, Max suddenly stopped and barked loudly. Hans rushed over. "He's found something!" At the edge of a steep cliff, they spotted footprints in the muddy ground leading into a narrow ravine. Marcus shone his flashlight into the crevice, and a weak voice called out, "Is someone there? Help us!" Cheers erupted from the team. The missing hikers, 4 in total, were huddled inside, exhausted but alive. Max barked excitedly, and wagged his tail as the rescuers carefully pulled each person to safety. One of them, a young woman named Sophie, whispered, "I heard barking. I knew someone would come." Hans patted Max's head, smiling. "He didn't just save my family, he saved yours too." Chapter 8: The Hero Returns. As the rescue team brought the lost hikers back to the village, the entire town rushed out to welcome them. News of Max spread quickly, and the dog became the center of attention. Children gathered around Max, while the adults thanked Hans for joining the rescue. Sophie, the young woman who had been saved, approached the Miller family to express her gratitude. "If it weren't for your dog, we might not have made it." Anna smiled. "Max is a gift to our family, and now, to the whole village." That evening, the villagers organized a small celebration. Max was given a special seat next to Lena, with a plate full of beef and sausages, a well-deserved reward for a hero. Hans stood up and recounted the story, from Max saving the family in the storm to leading the search for the missing hikers. The crowd erupted in applause, and Lena hugged Max tightly. "I told you, you're a superhero!" But deep in their hearts, Hans and Anna knew that Max didn't need a title. To them, the loyal dog had always been an inseparable part of their family, a friend, a protector, and now, a symbol of hope for the entire community. Chapter 9: Lessons from Nature. In the days that followed, the Miller family gradually returned to their daily routine. However, their fateful journey to Mount Hochberg had left a profound impact on them. Hans began studying weather patterns and disaster preparedness, determined never to let complacency put them in danger again. Anna taught Lena about resilience and gratitude, emphasizing that survival sometimes depended not just on people but also on four-legged friends like Max. One afternoon, as the family sat by the fireplace, Lena picked up a pencil and drew a picture, Max standing tall in the storm, protecting them all. She held it up proudly. "I'll hang this in my room, so I'll always remember the day Max saved us." Hans chuckled. "That's a great idea, sweetheart. But don't forget, Max didn't just save us once, he saved us twice." Curled up by the fireplace, Max closed his eyes, seemingly content with the warmth and love of his family. Outside, the Alps stood tall, majestic yet mysterious, a reminder that nature could be both friend and foe. But with Max by their side, the Miller family knew they would always have a hero ready to face any danger.